Hey folks, it's Dan from the future here. Before we begin this week's podcast, I just wanted to point out we recorded this on Sunday, the 25th of June, and the very next day, Monday, was when Paramount Plus pulled Star Trek Prodigy off of its service a few days ahead of when they said they were going to. So, if you hear us talking about, binge as much as you can before they take it off, you can't do that now because Paramount has now removed it from the service. So I just wanted to give you that heads up if you're listening and wondering what the heck we're talking about. That's what's going on. I now return you to your regularly scheduled podcast. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Positively Trek. I'm going to lean heavily on that word positively this week because I feel like we're going to need that a little bit. I'm Dan Gunther. With me, of course, as always, is Barry DeFord. Barry, how's it going?
I am good for a number of personal reasons in my life. I'm about to be getting married, and that's super awesome.
Yay!
So honestly, that's the happy part. We're recording this. I am under a week away from being a married man, so I'm pretty excited about that. But I'm also pretty pissed off at the whole Star Trek situation right now. And so yes, you're right. The suffix ly, positively, will definitely be positive about things, but we're definitely not happy about this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm positively pissed about stuff too.
There you go. Yeah. Wait, what's that noise?
What?
Oh God!
It's happened.
Oh God!
It's happened. That chair I pulled out. There's someone in it.
There's a mass forming. Oh, it's Bruce!
Wahaha! I am here to rain havoc on your Star Trek podcast.
Oh, man. Excellent. I am so excited to have you back here, Bruce. Bruce Gibson, welcome back to Positively Trek. So thrilled to have you here, especially to talk about what we're talking about, you being kind of a TV insider and all.
I'm so excited to talk about this because it's been a while since I've been on the show, and it's Positively Trek, and we just have a lot of positive things to discuss about Star Trek this week. So I'm like, why not do it now? Now's the time to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so for those of you who have been kind of following the schedule lately, I've been trying to get things back on track with, a regular episode one week with a book club episode the next week. And this week is supposed to be a book club episode. I had planned to talk about the Star Trek Strange New Worlds comics, The Illyrian Enigma, with Brandi Jacala. But unfortunately, some news came up and I had to assemble a panel of Trek experts, being Barry and Bruce here, to talk about it. And that, of course, is, if you haven't heard, I think you're living under a rock, and I kind of envy you not having heard this news because it sure bummed me out. The cancellation of Star Trek Prodigy at Paramount Plus, Season 2, which had previously, we had been told it had been renewed for Season 2, and they've been working on it and are continuing to work on finishing it, will not be shown on Paramount Plus. But not only that, Season 1, within the next few days, will disappear off of Paramount Plus as well. So, if that's your first time hearing that, I am so sorry. Gentlemen, thoughts?
Well, I just would advise Barry to hurry up and watch the whole season again before your wedding.
Yeah.
That's the idea. I've got to eke out some time here. But I'm upset, obviously. But I'm not upset. I feel like we as Star Trek fans tend to be a little less on the sensational side of certain bits, whereas I know we're very intense, and we've written letters to keep Star Trek series going and whatnot. And I know there have been ups and downs in that regard, but I feel like we're typically good sports about certain bits like that, especially in the newer Trek era. Watching Discovery kind of get its sea legs and everything like that, and not getting renewed for the full 7 as we would have hoped. And everything like that. But I think just, Dan, you and I had actually, I feel like we've bonded in our friendship a little bit over Star Trek Prodigy, to be honest with you. Me watching it and then getting you to talk with about it has really kind of helped me like it more. It's been something that I've been just sort of picking away at with kiddos in my life and stuff like that, but just to have the rug pulled out so incredibly quickly, and just very, I think what we're really feeling right now is the implication is it's very, very clear that Paramount doesn't care whatsoever about any of its properties if they don't make the money they want it to make. And I know that a lot of people will swat the side of their own head and say, well, duh, Barry, that's what, business is business and stuff like that. But like, I guess for me, it's the insult to the injury of now we can't even touch it anymore. And I think that ultimately gets the idea that ownership of media and the ability to experience an art form and a piece of entertainment is taken from us, right? If we would have bought these things at a video store or something back in the old days, we would have owned these. And even if they canceled it, we'd still own them, and it's not very often that the old rental places like Blockbuster would do something so rash and so brash so immediately. So I think it's the suddenness of it. And I think we typically, we sort of think of ourselves, or at least fancy ourselves, as being somewhat in the writer's room to some degree. A lot of what we've influenced as fandom as well. So for them to do something like this, it's a real slap in the face.
Yeah, I'll echo that last comment for sure. Like, it feels like an insult to the fandom, and whether, whatever executive did this just probably doesn't get Star Trek fandom, doesn't understand that the line they've just put through on something on a spreadsheet means so much to so many people. It clearly doesn't to whoever did that. And again, like you said, it's a business, yada, yada, yada. But it felt so abrupt and insulting to me as a fan. Like, I felt disrespected, and it hurt. It honestly hurt. This show that means so much to so many people. I go on social media and I see a lot of people talking about how their little ones are watching Star Trek Prodigy, and these 40-year-old fans, 40 and above-year-old fans like me, who are introducing the next generation to Star Trek through this show. I think there's a short-sightedness here that doesn't get what this show could mean to the Star Trek brand in the long run. There's the short-term quarterly profits, right? Quark said it himself. Long-term prognostications don't matter. It's all about short-term quarterly gains. And the Ferengi over at Paramount are following that. And I don't think that whoever made this decision really gets it, because this could be the jewel in the Star Trek pantheon that really would ensure the future of this franchise for decades to come. Now, I don't think that because of canceling Star Trek Prodigy, they're going to kill Star Trek for decades to come, but I think it could have been such a huge boost to that franchise. I honestly really lament this decision.
Yeah, and I'll look at it from a different perspective. They did get it because they tried it. They greenlit this show to begin with and gave it a second season. So I don't know how it performed. I'm assuming the performance wasn't stellar because they would keep it on if it was. So if it's not really doing all that well, then from their standpoint, it's like all the things we're saying of, it can bring in a whole nother generation of fans and things. There's the potential there, but maybe that potential just wasn't realized and it never happened, and maybe it still could happen, because the thing about it is that the positive side, because it's positively Trek, the positive side of this to me is that they're allowing post-production to finish the second season. They're just not pulling the rug from under them and just like, we'll never see the second season ever, 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 ever. Instead, it's going to be repurposed and sold to another outlet if somebody's willing to pay for it and put it on. So I guess from my standpoint, yeah, it's not going to be on Paramount Plus, not on Nickelodeon, but I'm hoping, and I feel pretty good that I'll see it somewhere else. So it's not dead to me. It's just, well, where am I going to see it and when am I going to see it is kind of where I'm standing right now.
I mean, hope always dies last. It definitely. But I think, what we're looking at here is, are we dealing with our media, the stuff that we like to watch, in such a passive way that all we can really do is weather these things like a weather pattern, right? And I think one thing that we as people who can participate in this whole, milieu of fandom and everything like that is be vocal and is to voice a certain level of concern. And I mean, honestly, what's happened in the world of streaming, this isn't unique to Star Trek, obviously. There's been other shows that have been canned overnight as well, have been curtailed and curbed. Streaming has changed everything. And I think the number one thing about streaming especially is trying to figure out what overheads and what profits are actually going to be long-term profitable. I know a lot of people who would go on Netflix, play Friends, sort laundry, vacuum, walk around the house, go to the bathroom, come back, and now they're like 5 seasons ahead, or whatever. They've just been letting it passively go. And I think wondering about that in terms of how these algorithms are calculating what is a good viewable show and what isn't. Because like streaming doesn't actually fit everyone's lifestyle, which I think is baffling to some who do kind of just sort of immerse themselves in the world of streaming, especially your CEOs and your board members and stuff. But like my lifestyle does not lend itself to being able to just like watch a TV show. I literally have to like push time aside to be able to get to that. Because I'm not necessarily your immediate watcher, I'm deemed unprofitable. And I think that's the biggest piece of all this is we can have whatever we want as long as it's profitable. And that's a frustrating slap, it's a frustrating slap of reality, I think, rather than merely a slap in the face. And I think that ultimately what this might open the door to off the bat is, I think, a lot more piracy and people not really giving a damn about what these corporations are trying to do. And I think that's the point is I don't think we should ever expect these corporations to ever be necessarily, thinking with a heartful mind or something like that. They're here to make money. And I mean, a CEO has a fiduciary duty to make money, right? Like a CEO can't just do something out of the goodness of their heart because they're bound by their board to be profitable and make money. So I guess it's kind of like, if you want the future you want, if we want the future we want, Star Trek's a great thing to do and watch and all this sort of stuff, but maybe this should be us asking bigger questions. But, I'm the politics guy, so that's where I go with all this.
Yeah, capitalism rears its ugly head for sure with all of this. Now, one of the interesting things that I saw come out of this as well is I've seen people supposedly in the know tweeting things that like Walmart and Target and Amazon are all in the process of the last few days selling out of the season 1, part 1 DVD and Blu-ray of Star Trek Prodigy. I ordered mine yesterday because it was kind of a hole in my collection that I hadn't filled yet. And I thought, I better get on that. I don't know if this is going to be around much longer, and I definitely want this part of Star Trek history. And apparently a lot of people had the same thought I did. So, these are all anecdotal, who knows, yada, yada. I don't know what the actual numbers are, but does that maybe signal a love of this that maybe hadn't been taken into account? I don't know.
I mean, it might. I mean, I'm hoping they come out with a box set of the entire first season, episodes 1 through 20. Mm-hmm. And if season 2 doesn't see the light of day, maybe through some kind of distribution channel online or on TV or something. I hope that they would then release a bigger box set that includes the never before seen season 2 with all of season 1 or something to that effect. And I'd love to see that. That would be cool too. But I mean, I think buying DVDs or Blu-rays and it selling out might send a signal to Paramount. But if anything, I don't think that would reverse Paramount's decision. Mm-hmm, but it would actually make it easier for them to sell the show to another outlet because they would use that as the carrot to say, look, this show is actually pretty popular. The Blu-ray sales, when we announced cancellation, flew off the shelf and they sold out. So there's a loyal base out there. You may want to pay the license fee and air this on your platform. So that would help in the selling of the show to someone else, I would think.
We as Star Trek fans definitely aren't like the pot of gold that like Marvel fans are. We're more like a box of silver or something. We're not going to make you as much money like day to day, but like slow burn wise, you're going to get like a longer term investment out of us, I think. And I think that's what needs to get understood if we're going to do this under the sort of consumer economy style. That, you know, I do hope you're right, Bruce, that a smaller platform is able to take this on and create a little niche market where, yeah, they're not going to make these skyrocketing overheads for all these other things. But I mean, I guess like Star Trek's always sort of had this problem, right? I mean, when Voyager went on UPN, it was supposed to be like the flagship TV show, right? It was supposed to be this big deal. But I find in a lot of cases, Star Trek, where it gets put, where it was put back in the days when syndication was important and what time of the day it's going to be showing on and what other TV shows are showing at the same time. I think something very similar to that nature is happening with streaming services, where they thought that maybe they could just like glut a whole bunch of Star Trek for the Star Trek fans who are typically just there for it and ready for more Star Trek at any point, and just realizing that we don't have that consumptive force. I mean, them filming things in Toronto is a way to save money, but obviously we are always looking for, you know, TV shows that have imagery and spectacle, and, you know, Star Trek obviously has a bit more progressive messaging and stuff like that, but we definitely don't, we aren't the same kind of base. So yeah, maybe a smaller platform of some kind taking us on. I mean, Crave would have been nice, but apparently that's not happening now too. I'm hearing extra stuff from you guys that's kind of got me a little baffled and frustrated.
Yeah, so what that's about, and I noticed nobody's really talking about this much up here in Canada, but there was a recent tweet that kind of caught my attention about Bell Media's application to the CRTC. Now, the CRTC is the regulatory commission here up in Canada that regulates what's on the airwaves and what gets broadcast to Canadians. And there was one tidbit, apparently, from Bell's application. Paramount has taken a number of properties, including new Star Trek series and popular old services like South Park, from Crave and CTV Sci-Fi and moved them onto its own streamer, Paramount+. Now, this was kind of a wait-and-see thing for us. Up here in Canada, we knew this was coming at some point. Paramount Plus launched here quite a while ago, and through what I'm assuming are some pretty ironclad agreements with Bell Media, Crave and CTV Sci-Fi had kind of their claws in the Star Trek stuff. And I'm sure the execs at Paramount were just kind of running out the clock on that and waiting to be able to move it over to Paramount Plus. And now that seems to be happening. So I went over to Crave myself just before we started recording here and looked at the various Star Trek series. And like I said, very quietly, nobody's talking about this, but Star Trek Picard says available until July 31st. Star Trek Prodigy says available until July 24th. Star Trek Lower Decks says available until July 31st. But Star Trek Strange New Worlds doesn't have any kind of note about its future status on here. So not sure when that will be leaving Crave, but I'm sure it will be as well. So yeah, Paramount Plus is kind of, it's bringing stuff under its umbrella and then kicking one out, I guess, is kind of what's going on up here in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a big surprise, right? I mean, we've kind of projected at some point these could fall under the Paramount Plus umbrella in Canada and leave Crave. And I think the reason you're not seeing a date for Strange New Worlds is because the current season is still going, and there's probably a certain amount of months after the season airs that it'll continue to stay on Crave before it moves to Paramount Plus. But it is odd, you know, to see things moving from where they've been all these numbers of years since every premiere has been on Crave, and then moving to another service, and then another Star Trek series just going to disappear and go somewhere that we don't know where we'll ever see it again. And it's odd because, you know, Barry's talking about syndication and the kind of the old days of TV. You didn't see shows jump around between networks, you know? It was basically every once in a while you did, but you know, the show's on the network, it gets canceled, you probably never see it again unless another network picks it up. But again, there's very few examples of that. So this is a different time in this industry. I was just at a convention a couple weeks ago in Denver, a streaming TV convention, and, you know, there's a lot of the rules of the old that we're seeing creeping into the new. The new has been the Wild West, but now we're starting to find out the Wild West is kind of like it was back in the old day. It's just television, and you can't just put anything on and pay whatever you're going to pay to put the show on. You've got budgets, and we've the whole idea behind these services was to attract an audience and make this work. And now it's like you've got the audiences, you got people paying for it. Now you have to start showing you can make money at it. And that's the problem we're facing right now, is you can't put all your eggs in this basket and expect it to be something that is going to be profitable. Now you got to make it profitable. You got the people using it. Now you got to cut your cost and show that you can make money at this. And that's what everybody's trying to figure out right now. And that's why a lot of these services that never did advertising are introducing advertising in, because the best model, they're saying, is to be both subscription and ad-based. If you have those two, you're going to work. And I'm not a fan of seeing that happen, but it's happening.
It's almost like they need to read some books on economy, like both Adam Smith and Karl Marx, right? Adam Smith, the father of capitalism, Karl Marx, the modernizer of socialism, basically both agree in their treatises on market economies that the rate of profit in all cases will always skew towards zero, no matter what. And again, looking at short-term goals and short-term gains, this is basically streaming services painting themselves into a corner, not realizing that there is going to be that first start, right? Look at Netflix when it came. It blew everyone out of the water. Now it's maybe fourth in line, right, comparatively to the rest. And as we see the larger corporations begin to consolidate, right, Disney started that. I mean, Disney's been good at doing this for a long time. I was actually thinking about TV shows and movies disappearing. Disney used to do that. They would release certain of their movies, and then they would say, oh, and this was going back into the vault. I always remember hearing that as a kid, back into the vault, back into the vault. And just that sort of tacit control over their product, right? And understanding that we don't own these platforms, right? The media owners control the content, and then also to the fact that media performs ideological functions within the within what they're trying to do. Like you're saying, Bruce, that sort of the transition or the movement from interest from like Wild West to something else, right? Game of Thrones used to be a thing with all the kind of medieval-y stuff, and we're kind of moving through the superhero genre and everything like that. And it's sort of cyclical. It kind of moves in its own seasons. And with streaming, these things can happen a lot more quickly, but the problem is the content becomes a lot more disposable. And like Star Trek Prodigy, I rest my case, it's disposable. Ultimately, if it isn't profitable.
I wonder if part of the thing is, and this always bugged me about economic theory and stuff, and I'm not an expert by any sense, but just as a total layperson kind of sitting here thinking like, well, if every quarter is supposed to see growth, how does that work ultimately? Like that can't be sustainable. And I feel like these streaming services, they have to gain new subscribers every quarter. Every quarter, they have to get new subscribers in order to be profitable. There's only a finite number of people that are going to subscribe. So I'm not an economic expert, but whenever I see that kind of figuring, I just kind of throw up my hands and say, I don't get it. Like Bruce, like you say, I guess it makes sense to me that the holy grail would be ads plus subscribers, because 2 streams of revenue, absolutely, but I don't know, it feels like there needs to be a fundamental change in the way these platforms make money. What that is, I have no idea. Like I can't figure this out. I'm sure there are people much smarter that know a lot more about this than I do that are similarly frustrated.
Well, I can speak to the cable TV model more so than this streaming model, because the company I work for, we don't have a subscription-based service like these. So I don't know exactly what the costs look like. But from a cable TV package standpoint, as someone who used to be a product manager at a cable company for video services, I would see the cost of the content, meaning the license fees that we're paying for these networks, continue to rise and get higher and higher. As a result of that, now I have to raise the cost to the customer. I have to raise that package price point. And of course, everybody complains about my cable bill just keeps getting bigger and bigger. The problem is that there's such big cost in producing the content and all the royalties involved in it and everything else that comes with it. And then we are flattening, we're kind of stretching the audience in different directions, because the more channels you add, the more that you're spreading that audience out thinner. You know, when you had a day of like 5 channels, you could split them in 5s, basically. Now you're splitting them in hundreds and now thousands and whatever. We just create more and more competition. And then we've raised the bar production-wise. I mean, how many times have we said, wow, this Star Trek show looks like it could be in a movie theater. It's cinematic quality. So we've raised the bar in production, and yet we're thinning the audience because we have so much services and so much choice and so many things. And don't think of just TV, but the video games and the TikToks and the YouTubes and just the internet in general, anything that is pulling eyes away from content makes it harder and harder to sell. So what starts to happen is you look at your cost and your margins are very small for this product, and you can keep adding subscribers, but the more subscribers you add, the cost still is the same per subscriber, and then that margin is still narrow. So what you need to do is try to lower that cost. And so as a result of that, you have to maybe drop some channels or some content or do something to help show that you can make a profit off of the customer, whether you have 10 customers or 10 million customers. You have to show profit per customer.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a blurring effect on the amount of media that's being created, and we are in unprecedented territory thinking of how many, genres and subgenres are, attempted to be catered at through different types of media online, both professionally done in terms of amateur, all of those sorts of things. Yeah, they all kind of come into this. I think another thing to bring up would be, there is currently a strike going on. So I think also these streaming services are probably trying to put up some bulwarks against what could be a pretty lean next year. And then where does that come from, right? That comes from the converging, overlapping contradictions of COVID, right? COVID on set, the amount of service industry people who are no longer around anymore, and the amount of protections that have still existed on set because a TV show can't have an understudy like a play. And then there's also just simply the cost of living, and then the individual family and people having just a decreased buying power, right? Everything's become a lot more expensive as well. So I do think that this is a sign of the times, and to some degree, perhaps trying to find new frontiers in the consumer economy. A lot of streaming services tried to do the Netflix model pretty much as is, and they've bitten off way more than they can chew, which is unfortunate because we've had our ears up with all these amazing new ideas that have seemed to be coming down the pipe one after the other, after the other, after the other. And yeah, the money just ran right out because of that diminishing rate of profit, right? We can have Philippa Georgiou come back for a whole season, but it's not going to make as much money anymore because the cost of the actor herself, right, being now an Oscar award-winning actor. Then there's all the special effects that are happening, all of these other things. Now, Star Trek has always done really well when it's just filmed, like shoulder over shoulder shots, in a courtroom or something like that. But in this respect, yeah, I think we have just sort of reached a bit of a critical mass where, because profit lies at the bottom line of anything that gets created in mainstream media, you're going to run into these issues. And it's disappointing, and it is a slap in the face. It feels bad and it feels terrible, but also it is that idea that, this is a model that's been ongoing in North American media, especially since the 1950s, really. If you think about television, moving from then to now, right, we see very similar phenomenon taking place.
Thank you so much for downloading this episode of Positively Trek. We truly do appreciate each and every one of our listeners, and I'd like to especially thank our Patreon supporters. Thank you to our Constitution class supporters, Jim Stoffel, Joyce Marin, and Paul D. Kinnear. If you'd like to become a supporter of Positively Trek and join our crew, please go to patreon.com/positivelytrek. You can get early access to episodes, exclusive content, shoutouts, associate producer credits, ad-free episodes, and more. Again, that's patreon.com/positivelytrek. Thank you all, and live long and prosper. I also wonder, does this kind of reframe a little bit the news of Discovery's cancellation as well? I mean, we know that Paramount Plus has some issues. There's some stuff going on. There's been some poor earnings reports. There's been, these little hints here and there that the streaming model may not be sustainable in its current form and all this kind of stuff. And that kind of got me to thinking about this phenomenon in comic books. If I could kind of take a little digression here, we know that, when they start a new series, the issue number 1 is always very coveted. It gets a lot of new readers right away, and it's this nice little spike in readership. So, we've seen this kind of thing translated over to a service such as Netflix, who will start a new show and get a bunch of new subscribers and get a lot of word of mouth. And then, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 seasons later, they axe the show and repeat it all over again with another brand new, exciting thing for people to kind of chase and get to know. Are we going to be seeing that in Star Trek a little bit? Like, are they kind of sweeping aside the old to make way for new? Like, are we going to get a lot of these more limited runs or movie events like the Section 31 thing? Is Starfleet Academy going to last 2 seasons and then be replaced with something else? Would that kind of phenomenon translate to the Star Trek universe?
I think so. I think it will. And not so much just to create new content to make things look more attractive. So, for example, if a Star Trek Starfleet Academy series is hugely popular, I don't think they're going to just say, well, we'll cancel after 2 seasons and create something new just to look fresh. I think they'll keep it going. I think my answer to your question is I think we'll see more cancellations and shorter, not as many seasons and such because of cost. I mean, again, we're back to the money. I think that's what happened to Discovery. I think Discovery had the biggest budget compared to these other Star Trek series. I think I read one of the creators behind Strange New Worlds answered one of the questions about the Klingons in this latest episode or the season premiere on Strange New Worlds, that they look more like the original Klingons because they don't have the budget even to make them look like the Discovery Klingons, whether they want to go that route or not. It just shows that Discovery had a bigger budget than Strange New Worlds. And I think, maybe even shorter seasons, 8 episodes instead of 10 could happen. I think we're going to see that the Star Trek series are still going to look good, but they're just not going to have the production budget they used to and may have shorter seasons.
I like the comic book analogy, and I think that's that's pretty on point. And I think that's also going to lend itself to a lot more sort of one after. And again, this is already a phenomenon we're seeing, like more quick reimaginings of profitable genres and franchises, right? Like I wasn't really fully over the Christopher Nolan Batman experience before they dropped another one down. And it was a little like, whoa, oh, okay, cool, all right. And tonally very different, but also similar in certain ways and whatnot. And so I think, Bruce, you're right that we'll probably see limited releases. The joke that I was thinking about earlier is like, are we getting sort of like a shrinkflation in terms of our television watching now too, right? Like I bought one of those like chocolate Magnum bars the other day, and wow, it's gotten way smaller. I haven't bought one in years, and I bought one, and it was like, I could visibly, like I was imagining something else when I looked at it, and it was just so thin and scrawny. I was like, oh, okay, and I paid like $2 more for it than I would have before. So yeah, I mean, this is really the I guess like economics 101, everyone. We can't have nice things if the shareholders aren't going to make their money off of it. And with that, maybe we're going to have to adapt a little more. But I think also being vocal, and finally, I think being creative is another really big one. Star Trek has had a fan fiction realm that took a big hit when a couple of grifters decided to try to grift us all back in the day. May they not be named because I don't like them. But I wonder if to some degree, if Paramount might come down a little harder on fan fiction-y sort of stuff moving forward, because I don't think I'm here for all of the glitzy, explodey sort of stuff. Like I watched the first episode of Strange New Worlds and it was fine. Watching Dr. Mbenga beat the snot out of a ton of Klingons was a little out of character, but it's interesting to see that side of him. But anyways, wow. But I've heard, because I haven't seen the second episode yet, that it's a massive tonal shift that takes place mostly in a courtroom. And I mean, some of the best Star Trek has taken place in courtrooms. So I think in that respect, Star Trek is a little more versatile that way. But what are we wanting? Like, do we want like think pieces that can really get people thinking, which probably won't make as much money, or do we want things that go boom? And that's, again, another issue that Star Trek has, is our tastes as a fandom are not the majority. People like stuff that goes boom. And again, I am not throwing shade at Star Wars. Star Wars has think pieces as well, but it also has really good go boom pieces. I think it has married that quite well. And for Star Trek to find its own way there, it's going to be difficult. And it could mean that, yeah, we are going to see kind of more little gourmet bits of Star Trek rather than the larger sweeping 24 episode series like we might have wanted in the first place.
A lot of good points for sure. And I don't know. I'm curious to see what the future of Star Trek is going to look like. It kind of feels like we have a perfect storm of stuff happening right now, which is very worrisome. I mean, the strike has been brought up. Very legitimate concerns that need to be addressed, absolutely. And that said, it still feels like the two sides are very, very far apart. So this could stretch on for quite a while. And it feels like we might very suddenly have our Star Trek fix dry up fast.
Oh, don't say that.
I know. Positively.
But you know what, right? Dan, you and I discussed this. It was in one of our past shows, or maybe it was offline. But when all of a sudden we were talking about, wow, we're getting all this Star Trek, I remember us talking about, well, there's going to be a day where we're going to say, well, now there's no more Star Trek because they exhausted it. We're taking a break from Star Trek. There's no new Star Trek. And already you're hinting at that now. We're not there quite yet.
No, I don't think we are.
Right.
But I'm just saying the next few years might be a little lean.
Yeah, and they might. And think about the books. I mean, you and I read the books all the time, and it's been lean the last several years.
Oh,
I mean, there was days, back in the 90s where it was like you got 2 novels a month. I mean, we're just happy if we're getting 2 novels a year. It's
literally, absolutely. Yeah.
But now the comics are accelerated. We're getting lots of comics right now, but everything comes in waves, right? So we're going to go through this wave. One thing we haven't also discussed is, I mean, this isn't just a video thing and a streaming thing. This is an economy thing, because like Barry's talking about his candy bar, poor thing with that little candy bar. But yeah, I mean, I buy something in the store just as much, and I can't remember what the item was, but when I brought it home, I had a similar item sitting still in the house, and I noticed that the boxes or whatever were the same size, but the amount was less that it listed, and I'm paying the same amount, if not more. And then I know even like at our company and other companies I've talked to, there's still that dreaded, do you think we're going to get into a recession? So everybody's kind of weary about that. Is there going to be a recession? So I think everybody's kind of playing it safe. And one other thing I'll just throw out real quick about the future of streaming. When I was at this conference, the most popular topic was free streaming television, because services like Pluto TV and Tubi are really starting to take off, and people are really attracted to these services they don't have to pay for. Yes, you have to watch commercials, but it's the traditional TV model. And so there may be investment in new content in that model where you get to watch things for free that are commercial based. And who knows, Prodigy could find its home there for its second season.
That would probably be the most viable option, I would say, is understanding that, yeah, the world of buying a subscription to a streaming service and not getting ads just clearly isn't viable for the overheads that these companies are looking for. And you're right. I mean, like, no one bats an eye when they watch cable television that they're going to watch 2 or 3, used furniture, and this and that, buy your hubcaps and whatever else they sell these days. But that idea that we are probably going to be moving back to something where advertisement is going to play a part. Like I would say, of all of the visual media that I watch, I'm probably, I would say, like, the most would probably be YouTube that I watch, and very carefully vetted accounts and stuff, and then just some interest stuff that Dan and I guilty pleasure our way through. We love ghost videos. But anyways, you got to sit through 2 or 3 ads. up to 6 ads depending on the poster. And I don't know, you just sort of endure it just to get at that free content. So already I think that's a functional business model, and something that a more modest franchise like Star Trek could probably manage to settle itself when all of this does settle. Because yeah, life is more expensive, things are more expensive, and the uncertainty of everything, right? With war, climate change, orcas are attacking boats, all of this extra stuff that we do have to keep considered on. But it is nice to sit down and unwind, to watch a nice episode of Trek every now and again, and to have that taken away really pisses me off. And so I think another future that we might be looking at, I think, is perhaps people finding other ways to get paywalled media. I do, obviously have a perspective there that I think all artwork should be open and shared. But yeah, I mean, people got to eat in this world that we have, and overheads keep going up. So it is kind of balancing that. And I think, yeah, a advertised service would probably be the best route for Star Trek moving forward, I'd say.
So thinking about Star Trek Prodigy specifically, then there's some paths forward, some future of it that takes different forms. I think worst case scenario, and I don't think this is likely, worst case scenario is nobody buys it. It sits unviewed, finished, a la the Batgirl movie that I guess no one will ever see because they just decided not to release it. I don't think that'll happen. I think, next possible scenario, which is not my favorite, is somewhere like Netflix buys it. It goes that second year and then gets canceled again because Netflix gonna Netflix, right? Maybe somebody could pick it up and even make more episodes of it somehow in the future. I don't know. What do you guys feel is the most likely, and what would you like to see happen with Prodigy?
Well, I'd like to see Prodigy go on forever, but that's not going to happen. I don't think we'll ever see a season 3. I really think that's a stretch.
Yeah.
I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't know. I mean, I knew this question was going to come up, and I still don't really have an answer for it. But there's something in my gut that says that we might see Prodigy season 2. And I don't know anything. This is just me talking. But I think we might see it like on an Amazon Prime for some reason. That's where I feel like it's going to end up. And yeah, it won't see a season 3. It'll be up there for a while, and then it'll be gone. And then you can't find it anywhere for a while. And then all of a sudden we're on this podcast saying how it just appeared somewhere else for right now. And
showed up on HBO Max for some reason.
Yeah.
Or sorry, just Max, I guess.
Just Max.
Streaming service whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
Where are the Star Trek movies this week?
Right, because we saw that with the movies, right? They've hopped around. And so I don't know if we'll ever see Prodigy just really be a huge success and just stay somewhere for a long period of time. So you got to hope that they come out with a home video release of the entire series, because you're going to want to hold on to that.
Already, like I'm considering, I need some kind of hardware media player. We don't actually, I've just realized, I went through the house this morning being like, get out the old DVD player. And we threw out the old one because it was busted.
Oh, no.
So we're going to have to go get a new DVD player. But this is that idea that, yeah, like you're going to have to own it if you really, really want it. And you're going to have to find ways to own it. And Bruce, I think, the other possibility is there may come a point where we will scream at Paramount enough that they will come back cap in hand and say, fine, here it is. You can buy it, right, on, say, like Amazon Prime, or we've made it available on Apple iTunes, whatever, or Google Play, or whatever the hell you want. Or they'll just put it and you can pay like $1.50 to watch the whole series off Paramount for you have a year, right, or something like that. Or maybe, like a smaller... I don't know very many smaller streaming services, and Lord help me, I don't want to subscribe to another streaming service. I'm subscribed out. But yeah, maybe there's a possibility, or like YTV up here in Canada might pick it up and play it just sort of in their regularly run schedule, considering it's already done. I mean, if I was a network, I'd buy it, make my money, a little bit of extra money off of it, probably from what I paid for it, and be done
in
with
the
it.
middle of a writer's strike.
Right.
I mean, it seems very tempting, right? Like, I mean, someone's going to buy this and show it.
It's a pretty attractive property in my eyes, but yeah, a season 3, don't kid yourself. It's probably not going to happen. The very likely home for any further Star Trek Prodigy shows will be either comic books or novels.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I saw some posts also by some of our, shall we say, more seasoned Star Trek fans who have been around for a number of years, talking about going to conventions back in the 70s and stuff, and 70s and 80s, and having kind of bootleg tapes of like the blooper reels and that sort of thing. So they were kind of suggesting that if the worst case scenario happens and this gets boxed and nowhere to be seen, you know, there's people who worked on that show that will probably be selling that out the back of some convention booth somewhere, bootleg DVDs, which will be of a much higher quality than those tapes of the blooper reels were back in the day.
Yeah, you know, this reminds me of something too. I'm going to the Star Wars side of things, but before Disney bought Star Wars, they completed, I think, 60-some episodes of an animated series called Star Wars Detours.
Oh, Detours. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and it's been over a decade now since those episodes were done, and they're just sitting on the shelf and nowhere to be seen, and no one at Disney is talking about releasing those anytime soon. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Prodigy, but it makes me think of that.
Yeah, there is precedent. It has happened. And I, like I said, I think there's a number of factors in its favor that show that it's going to be shopped around and someone will buy it. And they obviously have enough faith in it that they are currently funding the completion of season 2. It's not finished post-production yet, but Paramount is still paying for them to finish it so that they can shop it around. So,
and I don't think that I don't know if they'll sell this individually as a standalone series. It may be a package of Paramount properties that they're selling. So it may be in a package of a bunch of other Paramount movies and series. And it's like, here's all this great content, pay the license fee for it. Hey, and look, and you got the Star Trek brand in there. You can utilize that to get people to your service. But speaking of IPs like Star Trek, Paramount was also hoping to do more with the Grease franchise. So when they did Rise of the Pink Ladies, that was supposed to hopefully kick off a different series of Grease movies or series and such like Star Trek is. And that got pulled too. So the Grease franchise, I think, is not going to take off.
Yeah, that's a good point. Prodigy was part of a group of shows that were all canceled by surprise. So Grease, Rise of the Pink Ladies, Queen of the Universe, and The Game those were the 4 that were kind of all canceled at once. So that's an interesting thought that could be a package deal that maybe might make it a little harder, actually. If you want to take Prodigy, you have to take this one too. I don't know,
Well, it wouldn't be set up that way. I mean, I don't know if anybody says, I just want Prodigy. It's just more of hey, you get all these movies and all these series from the catalog, new and old. It just depends. I mean, I can't speak to certain deals that I know in the industry, but I know Paramount has done deals where you get a package and you don't necessarily pay for any of the content unless somebody sees an ad during it. I don't know if that model's still out there or not, but that was a while ago. I don't know if it's still like that.
That's fascinating. And I think it is also, we don't know what happens in the boardrooms and what conversations are being had. And I think the other piece of this is, and I think, Dan, you kind of illuminated this earlier, of like, the person who made this decision is not a Star Trek fan. And, I would be sure that the people who have a monetarily vested interest in what Paramount puts on its platform, they're not Star Trek fans either. But they are fans of making the investment money that they've put in back and more. And if it's not going to happen, it won't. And as a fandom, I think we have always persevered through a lot of hardship. We've gone through droughts, talking about things maybe becoming a lot more lean in the future. I think for most of us, if you were to talk to us this time last year, we would be having an extremely different conversation. And I think had we been able to use the guardian of forever to go back in time and talk to our back time selves and be like, don't get so happy. You're going to be very disappointed. And at least this is going to be sort of a harbinger of what might be coming. And I think preparing ourselves for some potential disappointments and what will feel like slaps in the face as these like really imaginative, new and interesting properties these series start coming out and then suddenly vanish in an instant, we might just have to get used to the idea that things are going to be a little more fickle that way as streaming sort of figures out how it can remain as profitable as it would like to. I mean, the thing here also is the short-term concept. I do think it is, I would honestly say, and maybe this is a conversation I should have brought up earlier, but I do think that this way of consuming media, the way we consume media, how we relate to it, I think can be sometimes damaging as much as it can be, hopeful and good, because there is a fair amount of just a constant, steady stream of information, of TV shows, of nostalgia, of everything trying to hit. And not everything's going to hit. That's kind of where we're at right now, is things just didn't work out for this property. And it's because we as a fandom just aren't as big as others. And here's hoping it gets picked up by other properties. And if things are to move forward, I think we have to be okay with, as long as the system remains as it is, we're probably going to see more ads. We're probably going to have to chase some of the TV shows we like, and we're just going to have to be okay with that.
I just want to mention two things. Number one, I don't necessarily agree that who's ever making this decision isn't a Star Trek fan. I don't know if the person or the people involved are, but I can tell you, as a Star Trek fan, if I worked at Paramount and I had to make these decisions, as much it would pain me to do it, I'd have to cancel, because how else am I going to explain not canceling Prodigy when they look at the books and they go, well, wow, you canceled all this other stuff. Why not this show? Because it's Star Trek. We got to keep the flame alive,
It's really good.
Well, it's fiduciary duty, right? And that's it, is under any board, as a CEO, you have the fiduciary duty to increase profits, increase the margins, make the lines in the graph go up. So you're right. Like they could have a Star Trek shrine room for all we know, and could be really, really having a hard time with this. But one way or another, Star Trek didn't win.
I want to go to that shrine room. I want to see that.
Yeah, right? A millionaire's Star Trek shrine room would be amazing. There'd probably be some like original props in there.
Well, and this is just kind of off that topic, but at Pluto TV, I've been to their corporate offices, and I think I may have shared this with Dan once, but they have a conference room where the wall is just the Enterprise D on the wall. And it's, so I forget what they call it. They don't call the room the Star Trek room, but it's like the space room or something like that is what the conference is. And there's a big Enterprise D on there. So they are fans in Pluto TV, which is owned by Paramount. But the other thing I wanted to mention too is, like, if we make a lot of noise about how much, showing the passion for the show online and social media, it won't necessarily probably convince Paramount to keep it on Paramount Plus, but it will ring the ears of those other platforms that go, holy crap, I need to get hold of this show. There's a lot of buzz out there.
And I've seen a lot of similar things shared on social media by the creators of the show. So, while it's on these platforms still, by all means, rewatch them. Watch them a lot. Like, those numbers will get through to them. But also, there are 2 young adult Prodigy novels that have come out. I have them both. I haven't read them yet, but I bought them. There's a 3rd one on the way. There's a Prodigy video game. I don't know if there's going to be comics, but I think they'd be silly not to. Enjoy that stuff. Share it. Introduce it to Star Trek fans who maybe haven't checked it out yet. Spread the word. Prodigy is great. Like, I really enjoyed it. Barry, I know you really enjoyed it. Bruce, when we've talked about it, we love the show. We've sung its praises on this podcast, and it's really, really worth checking out. And I know personally, I can think off the top of my head, 3 friends I know who love Star Trek who haven't watched it yet because it's a kid's show. If you're listening to this podcast, go watch that show. It is good. It is an all ages show. It is not a kid's show.
Stop listening to us and turn on Star Trek Prodigy. There is little time.
Yes, exactly.
See, that's a problem too, because I thought about that earlier today. There's that's probably affected the performance, because there's a lot of Star Trek fans that just haven't watched it yet. It's a kid's show. I don't know if I really want to watch it. And yeah, go watch it.
Yeah, 100%. So I feel like that's a pretty good place to leave this discussion here, but I'm sure to be continued. We'll be tracking this story, and as soon as we have any word of some other network or streaming service picking this up, we'll be sure to bring that to you. But in the meantime, Bruce, when you're not drooling over that Star Trek conference room over at Pluto TV, where can people find you?
Yes, I'm on Twitter at Admiral_Rex. That's Admiral with the underline Rex. I am doing some shows in Atlanta. I'm trying to think of something. I just finished a show, a 2-weekend run of sketch comedy, and it looks like I'm going to be in another sketch comedy show. I think it's August 12th and I think 17th and 18th, whatever that following Friday and Saturday. We haven't started rehearsing that yet, but so that's coming up. And I don't know, just doing that kind of stuff, you know?
That's exciting. I love that. Oh, and Barry, when you're not getting married under the crashing fireworks of Canada Day, where can we find you?
You can find me on the Positively Trek Facebook group. I have been a ghost once again, but I assure everyone that is just because if I'm not doing work with my job, I am also doing work getting ready to be married in under a week. But I would say just one quick thing. I'm nowhere near you, Bruce, sadly, because I would definitely come and check out your shows. But I think, ladies and gentlemen, that's another great place that you can spend your hard-earned dollars. Streaming services are all wonderful and great, but absolutely nothing compares to live entertainment. Go out, check out live entertainment, check out live performances, fellow human beings making you laugh, making you cry, making you think. I can't think of a better time. So definitely that's something that I've been trying to do a lot more of. And if you're in Bruce's neck of the woods, we should do like a recap on some of the cool things that you've done in that world. I know it's nothing to do with Star Trek, but I guess it has something to do with performances, and I'd love to know how that's going for you, because, you know, the world of entertainment isn't just simply, you know, big studios with massive budgets. Sometimes it's people doing stuff in their own local neighborhoods and stuff, and I'm always big on that.
Yeah, and just so those who don't know, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you're in the Atlanta area, that's where the shows are. And they're available on YouTube. Sometimes we live stream the shows. And so if you go to Sketchworks, one word, Sketchworks Comedy, go to their live tab and you'll see the last show in there where halfway through this show, I'm dancing in a pink unitard.
We will be linking directly to that in the show notes. So go check that out, please. Well, yeah, you can find the podcast on Twitter at Positively Trek, and of course in our Positively Trek discussion group on Facebook, patreon.com/Positively Trek if you'd like to help out the show. And yeah, until next time, I know sometimes it's tough with news that comes down the pike, but do your best to stay positive.